Foundation's Healthy Places Designing an Active Colorado webinar. My name is Annie Strajewski, and I'm the Communications Associate here at the Foundation, as well as your chairperson for today's webinar. Let's go ahead and get started with some housekeeping notes. Our webinar today is being recorded so that others who could not attend can watch the presentation later. Tomorrow, you will receive a link to this recording, as well as the PDF presentation that we will go over today. We'll also post the recording and the presentation on our website at www.coloradohealth.org. In order to minimize background noise, your phones will be muted in a listen-only mode during the presentation. The final portion of our webinar is devoted to questions. Please feel free to send your questions via the chat function at any time during the presentation. You should see a chat dialog area located on the lower left-hand side of your screen where you may type and send questions. You will also see a raise hand button, which we will not be using. You don't need to click it when asking a question. If you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, please call ReadyTalk's toll-free technical support number at 1-800-843-9166. Make sure to have your registration confirmation available. Finally, after the webinar has concluded, you will have the opportunity to give us feedback through a short survey. We ask you to take a minute and complete the survey, which helps us to improve our future presentations. Today we are joined by Chris Smith, Senior Program Officer at the Colorado Health Foundation, Carmen Faust-Luna, Project Manager at the Institute for Health Research at Kaiser Permanente, Colorado, and Kay Boki, Evaluation Officer at the Colorado Health Foundation. And with that, I'll turn the conference over to Chris Smith.
Thank you, Annie. And I want to thank all of you for joining us this morning on the presentation on the webinar that we're going to do. We know that your time is important, and we really appreciate you taking the time out to join us this morning. Healthy Places Designing an Active Colorado is an initiative that we created here at the Health Foundation to make it safer and more appealing for people to walk, bike, or participate in other daily activities that keep residents active. This initiative is a community-dependent approach, and it's really important that we have an opportunity to allow communities to determine how they could potentially identify and create possibilities to increase physical activity through changes in their built environment. So before we get into the detail about this specific initiative, I want to talk a little bit about the Health Foundation. So the mission of the Colorado Health Foundation is very simply summed up in an effort to help to improve, we work to improve the health of all Coloradans. I'm not going to go into complete detail on the foundation because when you think of all of the different efforts that we're involved in, it would take up all of the time. We could do a webinar on that. So what I'm going to suggest that you do is to check out our new website. You can go to www.coloradohealth.org, and you can find all of the information that you would need to know about the Colorado Health Foundation and contact information for me and the others that are on this, and some of the other folks that are on this call today. And if you have any questions, you'll have our contact information for sending us emails, and please don't hesitate to call us and find out more. So let's get right into it and talk a little bit about our topic today, which is Healthy Places. Healthy Places we launched as an initiative in 2012. And the original effort, as I mentioned earlier when I started, was to try to help communities figure out what could they do to improve opportunities to increase physical activity in their communities. The original version of Healthy Places was a 5-year, $4.5 million commitment. And when we launched that, it was our first time doing this type of a program, and we really didn't know how many communities would respond. We ended up having a great response. 26 communities did respond to Healthy Places, and we ultimately narrowed that down to 6 communities And we ended up selecting 3 communities after a assessment process and a process of us going out and interviewing and talking to those communities. Those 3 communities ended up being, one, a urban neighborhood of a large city, the second being a suburban downtown, and the third being a rural community. And I'll get into that in a little bit more detail in the slides upcoming. What we were looking for were communities that were challenged to see how they could make improvements to their physical environment and needed the assistance from a program like Healthy Places in order to be able to do that. The 3 communities that we ultimately selected for Healthy Places were, as I mentioned, Arvada, which is a suburban community in the northwest of Denver, Colorado. The Westwood neighborhood, which is on the west side of Denver, and the city of Lamar, which is a rural community in southeastern Colorado. So let's talk a little bit about each one of those communities so you can get a little bit of the flavor of what those communities were challenged with and how, and some of the things that they did through the Healthy Places program. So let's talk a little bit, start with Arvada. As I mentioned, Arvada is a suburban community right northwest of Denver. And when Arvada looked at Healthy Places, some of the challenges that they were trying to really take advantage of to get people active and moving were to build on some of the trails and access to parks and open space that they had in the community. They focused on building awareness of those trails and signage to try to get people to look at using that, and then programs to like bicycling and getting families and kids out and getting moving about the community. I don't know if Kay or Carmen would like to add anything about those communities at all.
I would just add, this is Carmen, that they were building on the asset that was already in their community at the time and upcoming, which is the Gold Line. And so a lot of the work that they did really focused on building the connections through parks and trails and wayfinding, like Chris mentioned, to really utilize the asset that was already going to be happening in their community, building off of that.
And for those of you that may not be familiar, the Gold Line is an extension, a new extension of the light rail system that's been built in metropolitan Denver. So if you think about the impact of having a transit line running through a community, Arvada wanted to take an opportunity to see how they could sort of respond to that big infrastructure change coming through their community. Sorry for the delay here. I keep pushing the wrong button. Let's talk a little bit about Lamar. Lamar is a great community of just less than 8,000, great city of just less than 8,000 residents in southeastern Colorado. If you have not been there, I highly encourage you to go down and take a look. But Lamar saw Healthy Places as an opportunity to not only bring their community together, but really to discover ways to not only connect their community through a project that evolved, something that they ultimately ended up calling the Lamar Loop, which if you look on that image that you've got on that slide in front of you, that sort of winding line that you see going around the downtown of Lamar is their Lamar Loop, and it connected a lot of different neighborhoods within the city. They saw that as a way to not only get people to use something that was there but was underutilized, but to really start to bring those communities together and to start to really build that sense of community stronger and make that sense of community in Lamar stronger. They also saw opportunities to activate existing spaces on their main street and take sort of vacant lots that existed between older buildings on their main street and really turn that into a place that folks could come together and join and really just have fun and get people out and about in their town. Kay or Carmen, is there anything that you would like to add specifically to Lamar?
Sure, this is Kay. One of the other projects that they are still underway in Lamar, but they are installing a skate park for the youth of the community. And one of the, I think, mainstays of the work that happened in Lamar around Healthy Places was involving a lot of youth, more so than in the other two, just because of the passion of the coordinator around assets that the youth could bring.
Right, and one other thing that I would like to add regarding Lamar and a final video which we'll be placing on our website. So in a follow-up, we can't do it as part of this webinar, but in a follow-up, we certainly encourage you to go, and we'll provide a link to that following this webinar so that you can, once we're able to post those final videos, and you can see, they're fairly short, about 4 minutes, but it will give you a sense of what those communities have been able to do and how Healthy Places has helped them to be able to increase opportunities for safe physical activity in their community. And we'll have those videos ultimately for all 3 of the communities. So let's go to the last community of the original round of Healthy Places, and that would be the Westwood neighborhood of Denver. For those of you who are not familiar, Westwood is on the west side of the city, and it is a community that is largely Latino with a high percentage of monolingual Spanish speakers. And the slides that we show you here give an example of a condition of an alley. They have a lot of kids in that community that would walk to school, and we know so many kids, not everybody's walking to school these days, but in Westwood neighborhood, a lot of kids were walking to school, and they were walking through these alleyways like you see them in that photograph to the left. One of the things that they wanted to come together to do is say, how could we improve the environment so that for these kids walking through there, it's not, filled with trashy dumpsters? How do we clean it up and even make alleys fun? So these alleys have been turned into pathways that these kids can walk through to be able to get to school, such that they've expanded beyond the couple of alleyways that they've worked on, and they've improved even more of the alleys that the kids are using. And they've also made changes to a major road that was cutting diagonally right through the middle of their neighborhood, and made it simpler for people to be able to cross what was really a four-lane kind of a highway with 2 lanes of traffic going in either direction. A lot of people walking in the community and wanted to make it safer for people to be able to go visit friends and neighbors and go shopping and things like that. And so they used the opportunity of Healthy Places to improve those parts of their neighborhood physically, but then it also spawned an organization called Westwood Unidos, or Westwood Unidos existed, but it helped Westwood Unidos to be able to do even more work, not only physical improvements, but work that would also help to bring that community closer together. Kay or Carmen, would you like to add something?
Sure. A couple other projects that Westwood worked on are Westwood Park, which is a park in their community that a lot of people just didn't know about, and they didn't know that it existed. And so with Healthy Places funding, they were and are able to make improvements to that park, and they've also been able to leverage funds from other grant money to make even more improvements. So this fall they are planning on really revamping that park and doing a lot of programming to get the community at the park. And then another project I wanted to call out is La Casita, which is a learning and physical activity center off of Morrison Road, which is the road Chris was talking about, where we've made a lot of improvements. And so at La Casita, they do a lot of programming for residents, from ESL classes to Zumba, and it's really had a huge impact in the community. It's kind of similar to Lamar. It's a place where community can go, and it is really visible because it's on that main strip.
Great, thank you, Carmen. So I've got a slide. On the next slide here, you'll see just some of the comments for people in the communities. I'll let you just read those, but some of the comments from folks in the communities that we've worked with Healthy Places thus far. And I think what we've found is that, of course, Healthy Places doesn't assume, we don't say this is what you must do in order to help increase opportunities for physical activity in your community. You know your communities best, and what you choose to do is really that is really unique or individual to that community. But what we're hoping for with Healthy Places is to really take that sort of desire to make change in their community that people can really see, and allow them and create an opportunity for those communities to really be able to take that change and move it forward, and not just think about it from a planning standpoint, but to really start to implement some of the ideas that they have for how they can make change in their community, how people can make change in their communities. So, as I mentioned, this is our first round. That was our first round of Healthy Places, and there's a few things that we've learned over that process. And I'm going to have Carmen and Kay join me as we go down this list here, but one of the things that we've learned related to Healthy Places that seem to be really important for helping those efforts to be successful were that these communities would identify a strong community coordinator, somebody that can really sort of be the point person for moving the Healthy Places effort forward in their community. You know, this is the type of thing that can't really, it doesn't only work by committee. You have to have somebody whose responsibility is to look at Healthy Places and think about it on a day-to-day basis and be instrumental in moving that forward. And one of the things that we learned is that those folks kind of rose to the surface within each of the 3 communities that worked in the first round of Healthy Places, and have been very important to us being able to move forward. So the next thing that we learned is that Healthy Places is best suited to communities that are ready to move forward. We understand that a lot of the communities that we work with have been through plan after plan after plan, and they're really itching to do something and to move forward. So being ready and having a group that has thought about what you're trying to do and make changes and how can we help improve the health of our community, that's the kind of community that would be best suited for looking at Healthy Places and being able to so to speak, hit the ground running. And so community readiness is really important. It's important that you have community support. You know, we can't just have with Healthy Places, since this is something that involves so much and has the potential to have such a broad impact in a given place. We want to know that you have community support. And by that, we're saying that it's not just the people that are looking to lead the Healthy Places effort, whether that is a community group or whether that is the city, the local government, whatever it is, whoever is looking to lead this effort, we want to make sure that the other folks that need to be involved, the other stakeholders in your community, are engaged to the point to where when you look to try to make something happen, that you have the support of that community to be able to move forward in a timely and an effective way. The key aspect of looking at Healthy Places, and it's an important part of being successful in terms of what we've learned with our first round. That kind of speaks to partnerships and who you choose to connect to. So who you bring into that partnership is much more important than how many partners you have. It's a lot of times folks figure, let's have this whole arm's length of partners, and just list them all. But if those folks are not committed and they're not supporting what you're trying to do and don't have a really defined role for how they're going to help you to make some of the changes that you'd like to make in your community, these are not the partners that you need. So you have to think really about who you're connecting with and make sure that those partners are the folks that are going to help you move forward. And then leadership. Now that leadership can come from the most grassroots folks in your community all the way up to the mayor of your town, and making sure that leadership is committed to trying to help make changes that will improve the health of your community. Because remember, the intent behind Healthy Places is not just to impact a few, but is really try to help as many folks as we can within a given community. So Kay or Carmen, would you like to add anything?
This is Kay. So I guess my observation while listening to Chris talk was, despite the fact that the goal of this is to change your built environment to increase physical activity, so a large part of the goal and a lot of the money is spent on hardscape changes, right? Changes to physical things in your community. The success of it comes down to the humans that you are involved with and getting those people in place. So like Chris said, whether it's the mayor or it's your city council person or your county commissioner, those things will vary based on the type of community you're in. Having those leadership folks involved and then also having folks in the community that are committed to the idea of this seems to be essential to its success.
So one of the things about Healthy Places that we certainly like, one aspect of Healthy Places that we certainly focus on is, so how do we know if these projects are successful? I mean, it's one thing to do a lot of stuff and have a lot of activity going on, but how do you know if it's successful? So that's where we start to look at it from the evaluation standpoint. And so we're going to have, I'm going to ask that Carmen and Kay give us a little bit of background on some of what we learned from an evaluation standpoint with Healthy Places.
Hi everyone, this is Carmen Luna. I am on the evaluation team at Kaiser Permanente, Colorado, and we are housed at the Institute for Health Research. Most people think Kaiser is just clinical, but we actually do have a research shop. So we are the current evaluators of the first round of Healthy Places, and so we've really learned a lot, as Chris said, and are excited to take our learnings and build on those for this next round of Healthy Places. Our mission is to implement collaborative and meaningful evaluation and research by designing projects which answer relevant evaluation questions, providing results that help organizations learn and take action, and building the capacity of organizations to conduct evaluation. And so as you can see on your screen, we have some highlighted words in there that we really focus on and take pride in. So collaborative probably being the most important one. We consider that the hallmark of our work. We really want to work together with you to develop this evaluation and really answer those questions that you guys have. So that kind of comes to the next points, which are meaningful and relevant. We want to make sure that this is important to the Colorado Health Foundation and also important to the communities that we work with. And we don't want to just do an evaluation to do evaluation. We want to really make sure that we're working with you along the way to help you guys out and to help the foundation out. The next is learning and action. This is another one that is really important. We have learned a lot from the first round, and we will learn a lot with this next round. And so it's really important that as we go, we take action mid-implementation. We don't wait until the end to say, oh, we learned this, but we didn't do anything about it. We really want to learn as we go and course correct based on those learnings as we can mid-project. And then the last thing is capacity. We understand that communities have different capacities for evaluation, and so we really want to meet communities where you are and build up your evaluation skills as we can if you need that help. And we realize that some communities don't. So our overall goal for this evaluation is to conduct a cross-site evaluation, meaning that we will look at all of the communities that are selected and come up with common evaluation questions and metrics across all communities and kind of roll those up into an overall evaluation. And then also, we will be providing individualized evaluation technical assistance to each grantee. And so this is a little bit different than the first round. The first round of Healthy Places, we were just the cross-site evaluators, and we learned from communities that they really needed some of that individualized evaluation technical assistance. And so we have course corrected and are going to be doing that.
Great, thank you, Carmen.
And then on our next slide, we just go over our approach to evaluation a little bit. Obviously, for this round of Healthy Places, since this is a planning grant, the focus will mainly be on planning and coordination. So we will work collaboratively with the Colorado Health Foundation and the selected communities. Some of the activities that we might be doing include participating in the ULI panel process, which you will hear more about at some point, collecting baseline assessments, working with communities to develop individual evaluation plans, as well as questions and appropriate methods to collect data. And then once the community's implementation plan is accepted and funded, we will provide individual evaluation technical assistance to each community. So each community will still be required to do evaluation and should budget for that accordingly, but you will have access to our team to assist with developing tools and collecting and analyzing data. Data collection. So we'll include metrics that help us answer cross-site evaluation questions, and this will allow us to aggregate the data and tell the story of Healthy Places across all of the communities. And then, as I mentioned, we'll work with each community on data collection that is specific to your community. So, for example, if you're enhancing or improving a new park, we will work with you to measure the usage and the activity in the park. And then the other three I won't go as in-depth in, but will be another one of our approaches is evaluation technical assistance. So as I mentioned, we want to meet you where you are. Data management and analysis, which is really dependent on the methods that we implement, and then reporting and dissemination. So that is really how we approach the evaluation of Healthy Places.
Great, thank you, Carmen. And to sort of summarize, in all of that work that we're going to be doing there, we really want to make sure that as communities are planning or taking their plans and looking to move them into implementation, ultimately, we want to make sure that whatever it is that you choose to do through Healthy Places, that when you move forward, that you know whether or not you're meeting your goals and being successful in that whole process. So, thank you very much. So, we have now gone over introduction, and we've talked about the first round of Healthy Places, and so we're here today to talk about you and your applications. So what's changing now at Healthy Places? We talked about the 3 communities that we worked with in the first round of Healthy Places, and some of the criteria that we found that worked. And so how much is Healthy Places changing in terms of us moving forward? Well, what we found out is that supporting these communities' efforts to improve the neighborhood and the built environment was something that the communities did want to do, and they did want to make these sort of physical changes that would make it easier for people to be able to get out and about. And one thing that I do want to touch on right now is we've said communities a lot, and I think it's important to talk a little bit about what we mean when we say that. community really has to be designed by the applicants. So you come in, we're not saying this is what community is. It could be a place, it could be a group of people, it could be a neighborhood, it could be a whole city in terms of Lamar. It really has to be defined by you, but it has to be certainly inclusive enough that you have enough of those committed folks and enough of those partnerships and enough of those relationships to be able to be successful and not so large and sort of large and overwhelming that it starts to make it more complicated or more challenging for you to be able to move forward with some of your ideas. So you have to think about how you want to define community when you're looking at applying for Healthy Places. So what's the same is that we're still focusing on improving opportunities to improve the physical environment and make it easier for people to be physically active. The change that we found, though, is as we worked with those three awardees, grantees in the round of Healthy Places, is that whether or not people are able to get out and about and use some of these improvements, whether it's access to trails like in Arvada, or whether it is the Lamar Loop, or whether it is walking more in the Westwood neighborhood in Denver, whether or not people are able to get out there and to take advantage of these can be dependent upon more things than just having those resources available to the community. So what we've done is we've started to use these social determinants of health, which is just a really more technical way of describing the fact that there are factors that influence whether or not you're going to be able to use some of these resources that exist in your community. And starting at the top there, you see, so how your neighborhood or your environment is built out is going to be one factor. You know, is to walk across the street, for instance, if you're running into a lot of traffic, heavy traffic, it's going to be hard to do that, regardless of how much you might want to do that. Or the health of your residents, and health care is going to be something that's important. Looking at the social and the neighborhood context. Do you have a community that comes together, or do you have people that are separated and isolated? How do you make sure that you're getting everybody engaged? Education. To what level is education and awareness and have to play into that? How do you engage? Maybe in some communities it might be engagement of schools. And then economics. I mean, for some folks, certainly you have to have the ability to be able to take advantage of some of these things. So we want to make sure that those are the types of things that you can address. So while that focus on Healthy Places remains the same in terms of our interest in promoting opportunities to increase physical activity, if there are other barriers that exist in a community that you want to think about or look at in a little bit of depth, Healthy Places will allow you to consider that as a portion of what your work is. Your primary focus, once again, is still on ultimately making changes that increase opportunities for physical activity, real sort of physical changes, but we also want to give you the chance to be able to address some of these other potential barriers that could exist in your community. So that's something that we did learn with Healthy Places in our first round that we want to incorporate into our second round. So let's walk a little bit about how these steps for applying work. So this is our webinar related to our open call for applications. Remember, on our first round, we had 26 applicants that applied. So this is our open call, so get ready. And your submittal deadline is going to be June 15th, 2017. So you have to be thinking about what you're doing and get ready to go. And when you submit on June 15th, what we'll do is we'll go through a process of reviewing all of the applications that have come in. I will go into a little bit of detail on the submittal, but I also would want to suggest that you also look at our website because it has a lot more detail in terms of your application to Healthy Places, and any questions that you have related to that, you can feel confident about submitting that to me or the rest of the team, and we'll be happy to answer those questions that you have about your application. So once we go through this process of looking at all of the applicants, our goal is to then select up to 4 communities that would be able to receive Healthy Places grant awards. Once we have selected those 4 communities, then those grantees or those awardees under Healthy Places would go through a 2-phase process. And we'll talk a little bit about how that 2-phase process will work. In phase 1, which we're calling planning, it really is an opportunity for us to say, okay, let's take a little bit of time here and see what plans do you already have, what plans might you need to develop, and to consider how they all work together to help you move forward with implementation quickly. So the goal is not to start completely from scratch, but it's really to move as quickly as we can through planning. As part of that planning process, one of the technical assistance providers that technical assistance members that you'll be able to work with as part of your team is the Urban Land Institute. Now, the Urban Land Institute is a large research organization and practical sort of project-based organization that works nationally. And they will come in and work with your community for about a week, a real intensive effort to be able to look at what plans you already have. And they draw the members of that team from a variety of disciplines. They're all experts in their field. They can help you with real estate. They can help you with planning. They can help you with regulations, all sort of things that sort of influence whether or not you're able to move forward. And we saw that as being the ULI's involvement, the Urban Land Institute's involvement, as being one of the most successful aspects of Healthy Places. The 3 original communities worked really well with that, and that's something we definitely want to continue when we look at Healthy Places moving forward. And you'll receive then those 4 communities that we selected in phase 1. You're going to get a small grant of $20,000 to help you actually work with the Urban Land Institute, and as they're going through their process of working with your community. So it will help to defray some of the costs that you'll have related to doing that work. The second partner that you're going to work with, who you've heard from already today, is going to be our evaluator. And that's going to be Kaiser, and they're going to be able to assist you, as Carmen mentioned earlier, with thinking about your plan, how are you going to evaluate the work that you're going to do, and how you're going to track and define success, and make sure that when you come back to submit your implementation, that you have a plan that you know and you have markers in it for how you know that you're going to be successful. Carmen or Kay, is there anything you'd like to add to that? Okay. So then once we do that process, we will then go to phase 2. So the whole point of phase 1 is to get you ready to just make sure, let's kind of bring everything together and then move quickly towards phase 2. And the phase 2 is all about the implementation. In phase 2, you will then be able to submit your strategy to the foundation for what you would like to implement. And in that implementation strategy, you will have the opportunity to receive up to $1 million of additional funding to be able to move forward your project. We anticipate that we would expect communities to come back to us for that implementation phase at the latest by spring or summer of 2018. That's how the process will work for phase 1 and phase 2. And then once you get to phase 2, it's going to, your technical assistance team will change a little bit. So in this slide, let me show you, we talked about your technical assistance team. In phase 1, you're going to work with the Urban Land Institute. That's the ULI that you see at the top. And you will work with the evaluator, and that will be the work that Kaiser is doing. When you get to phase 2, the work of ULI will be mostly done at that point. You then will have the opportunity to work with, continuing with your evaluation team to make sure that you're setting your goals and meeting the goals that you have for your project. But then at that time, you will have the opportunity to add a communications and marketing partner who's not only going to work on the overall Healthy Places effort, but is also going to specifically be able to work with your community and to help you to provide communication and marketing for your specific effort. That marketing partner can either be the organization that is working on the overall Healthy Places effort, or you would be able to add somebody maybe that is local or specific to your community. They do need to be able to work together, but I mean, you'll have the flexibility to be able to look at how you work with that marketing partner. And then the last partner that you would have for your technical assistance team, we are calling a Healthy Communities partner. But as I mentioned earlier, I talked about the social determinant of health and some of the other challenges or some of the other obstacles that could influence whether or not you're improving or increasing physical activity in your community. And let's say, for instance, one of the challenges that you have might be related to safety or something like that. If you wanted to then, if that was a big issue that you wanted to address, you could then bring in somebody maybe that helps you focus a little bit on thinking about how you can address some of those challenges. That's the role of that fourth partner. So whatever it is that other challenge that comes out of those contributors to whether or not you can increase opportunities for physical activity, we want to be able to have you focus on that. So that's going to be specific to your community. So we don't know the answer to who that's going to be yet, but we do know, based on our experience with the original 3 communities in Healthy Places, that being able to look at that in more depth is something that is going to be important. So we want to make sure you have the opportunity to work with those folks too. So let me just we're almost at the end of our webinar here, so we'll provide a little bit of a summary. So under the new round, the second round of Healthy Places, you're going to have the opportunity to work with a dedicated technical assistance team. On the 2 phases for the 4 communities, up to 4 communities that we select, they'll be able to work with you over the 2 phases of the award process of the awarded communities. And we will select up to 4 communities, and each of those communities that we select to move into phase 1 and 2 would have the opportunity to receive up to that additional $1 million. So that is all that we have in terms of the overall presentation for today. This is our contact information for the 3 folks that were on this webinar with you today, and we will now open it up to you for your questions.
Thanks, Chris. And as a reminder to all of our callers on the line, you can submit your questions via the chat function, which should be on the lower left-hand side of your screen. So any questions that you have, feel free to add those, and we will address them. I had a couple that just came up as we were going through that I thought perhaps we could address. The first one, Chris, how do past communities identify their community coordinators? What does that look like?
Actually, I'm going to ask Carmen and Kay to sort of think about that.
I know that answer.
I think that in the case of Lamar, they had a very strong community coordinator in Lamar that had been working on health-related issues in that city for some time. And I think it's sort of through their application and award that person became sort of evolved into the community leader. Her name is Emily Nischberg. She's done a wonderful job down in Lamar. And so in that case, I think they had somebody who they knew would be the person that would take that leadership role.
Yeah, and in the other 2 communities, in Arvada, they hired someone new. The grant for Arvada happened to live with the city of Arvada, and so she was a employee of the city. And for Westwood, they had a they had folks that were already working in Westwood Unidos, and they had a strong leader there who ended up being the coordinator in the end.
Then in the third community of Westwood, they had an...
I covered Westwood.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So I think we covered all three of them. Any other questions?
Yes, we actually just had a question that has come in. Is it required or recommended that applying communities be primarily or majority lower income?
Well, the emphasis with the Health Foundation, we wouldn't say that the community has to be entirely low income in order to apply. So that's not a barrier to applying. But from the perspective of the Health Foundation, we certainly are wanting to make sure that everybody in that community has an equal opportunity and has and that the community is working to not only make sure that everybody in their community, regardless of their income or economics, has not only the opportunity to be able to participate in improving the environment and having that access to physical activity, but that those communities, in whatever way they choose to do it, are making sure that they're taking active steps to ensure that folks that maybe don't have as many financial resources have the opportunity to be able to participate also. So we want to ensure that everybody in your community is having a chance to be part of the benefit of Healthy Places. So while it's not a decision barrier, it certainly is important to make sure that you're reaching out and including everybody, regardless of economics.
Thanks, Chris. Another question is, does my community need to have an existing coalition of some sort?
It is certainly important that you have a group, since we are interested in being able to move into the implementation phase. The timeline that I gave you, where I said late or mid 2018 in terms of moving forward, it's funny how fast that timeline will get here. I mean, from the point of applying in June to when we select our communities to the time that you want to get to applying. But we expect that would be the latest that communities, sort of like summer of 20, would be the latest that communities would look to move into that implementation phase. Our goal is that if you're ready to move forward sooner, that's fine. But we want to make sure that in that planning phase, that when you develop your strategy, that it is inclusive of the assessment and the recommendations that the Urban Land Institute has done with you in your community, that it's inclusive of the plans that you do have and any that you need to develop, and that the work with working with our evaluation team, that you come up with a way to make sure that you really have concrete ideas about how you're going to be able to determine what it is that you're doing and how you're going to define whether or not you're going to be successful. If you meet all those criteria, then when you come back to the Health Foundation, if you can move forward sooner than that late date that we gave you, that's fine. But we do want to make sure that people are prepared to move into that implementation. And then, of course, you also will have to have a clearly defined budget for what you're going to do with that up to $1 million. So it's important for you to think about all of those things before you come back to move forward.
Thanks, Chris. And somewhat related, but a little bit more on the operations side, is there a separate application for Phase 2?
No, there's not going to be a separate application for Phase 2. So this is why it's important. When you apply when you apply to Healthy Places, it's going to be one application. The first application is going to focus on the first application has to be your idea. This is what we want to do as our community to move forward. This is why this idea of readiness and thinking about what you'd like to do is important. So when you apply to Healthy Places, you're applying for both that phase 1 and that phase 2. We want to use the phase 1 opportunity to basically get everything together and to double check what you're going to do and make sure that you're ready to move forward. And then when you are ready, and you submit that to the foundation, we'll look at that, and if we sort of agree that you've kind of used those resources to be able to get ready to move forward, then that's when you'd be able to look at having that second $1 million, that $1 million phase 2 implementation grant released. But it's important to know that this is not, we're not going to put you through the process of going application 1 and then a whole nother application for application 2. We're trying to simplify it as much as we can to be able to make it easier for you to be able to apply and move through Healthy Places.
Thanks, Chris. So at this point, we have a few more minutes for some additional questions. Again, if you would like to ask a question, action on the lower left-hand side of your screen. We'll give a couple more minutes for us to see if there are any more questions out there. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions pop up, so Chris, I will turn it back over to you if you have any closing comments as we wind it up.
Sure. So the last thing that I would like to say is that Healthy Places has been a great opportunity for the Health Foundation for us to be able to engage with the folks around Colorado that we've worked with. We've been very excited about the opportunity to work with the 3 communities that received Healthy Places awards in the first round of Healthy Places, and we're really excited about the potential for working with folks through the second round of funding. We're excited about Healthy Places, and we look forward to working with you in the future. And we'd say that if you do have any questions related to the effort and you're thinking about applying, to feel free to contact me or the others on the team. We will look at getting you answers to any questions that you have, and we look forward to helping you to be successful in your application.
Great. Thanks, Chris. So that concludes our webinar today. Again, if we weren't able to answer any questions that you may have had, please feel free to reach out directly to Chris, Carmen, or Kay. Tomorrow, all participants will also receive an email with a link to the webinar recording. Don't forget to complete the short survey that will be available on your screen after we end the webinar. Your feedback will help us to improve our future presentations. Thanks so much for joining us, and have a great day.